Welcome to Cut to the Crypto, brought to you by Unstoppable Domains. I'm Tony Karen Brown, and I'm your host. This is your 15 minutes of crypto, asked and answered. Today, I'll be talking with Paula Petit. Paula, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
I'm really excited by this one for many reasons, but let's first introduce you. So you are the Chief Commercial Officer at Middleman Labs, and that's a global blockchain and Web3 software development house. Paula, you've also worked in the blockchain industry for over 4 years now, and you very much started that, I'm going to call it that crypto blockchain journey by launching Bitfract, which is a crypto portfolio management tool, and it was later acquired by Shapeshift. Congrats. I always like when women, we need more women, having their companies being acquired and selling. We need more women anywhere, full stop. But what was interesting is when I kicked off this podcast, I purposefully didn't want to solely talk about people in crypto with a crypto expert that only wanted to talk about crypto. And so I've talked with, CEOs of software companies and media companies and execs at Formula One teams and IndyCar drivers, people that you wouldn't normally associate with crypto. But I also felt it was about time that I started to talk with someone like yourself who actually lives and breathes this every day and who knows more about crypto than anyone I've ever talked to. So you've mentioned it, and before we go into the question at hand today, I wanted to chat about something very briefly beforehand, is that you've mentioned that you focus your efforts on making blockchain technology both more accessible and also more digestible for everyone. And I can say this as someone who actually discovered you via your incredible writing and the way you put things out in the world and the way you explain things. And I thought, wow, this is someone who truly gets it, but also understands that we need to lower the barrier to entry to get more people in. So maybe just before we kick off, talk to me about that, what sounds like your North Star a little bit of creating that accessibility and digestibility within the crypto space.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been in the space for about 4 years, so I'm comfortable with the things now. But, first coming into this space, it's a very overwhelming, very intimidating space. Even in my first year, I would, try talking to people at my company or this and that, and they would give me an explanation of, something we were doing and be like, okay, thank you. I understand now. I didn't, because there's so much vocab to take in. There's a complete kind of rethinking of so many basics of how, the world technology works. So, my goal is to always kind of try and explain blockchain, especially if I'm speaking to people new, in a way that is understandable to people who aren't in the space and digestible, whether it's, a friend in tech, my mom, a family member. So between both educating, new people, and then also at Linum, we build custom Web3 blockchain applications. And one thing we've always very much focused on was, trying making it as easy as possible, especially if the users are, traditional users, because the only way we're going to actually have blockchain, take over and be critical in our daily lives is if most people can use it. And if you need to be a blockchain expert to use it, we're only going to have blockchain experts in it.
That's a great way of putting it. I also like the fact that you brought in your mum, because I know that when I can explain something to my dad and my dad gets it, I've actually understood it myself. Oh, yeah. Because I know that I truly had to understand it to break it down. And look, you and I, when we kicked off our first conversations, like we hit it off in this sense of like, oh my God, we have to go beyond the hype of crypto. Let's talk beyond the hype that's happening. It's very easy to get caught up in, I'm going to in quotes, like the sexy stuff of crypto, the games, the NFTs, but there's so much more to it. So talk to me about this. There's an actually, let me take a step back. With regards to going beyond the hype, there's a concept, or there's an argument, an idea in support of crypto that is always tied to, it's about removing the middleman. Talk to me about that, both from a desire, an innovative perspective of we now can potentially remove the middleman, and maybe in some cases there is a need to remove the middleman. So yeah, let's chat about that.
Yeah. So basically, blockchain, as I said, is really good for removing the middleman. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
So backing up just a teeny bit, blockchain first came out over a decade ago. It was first created using Bitcoin, and basically what it is a decentralized system of computers that
Yeah.
basically act as a database between each other, and they basically check each other to ensure that they have the right data. And if you hack one computer of the millions of computers in the system, all the other computers will identify it and be like, that computer's wrong.
Yeah.
So that is like at a very, very basic 30-second explanation of kind of what blockchain is. And that was the first iteration. What came a little bit later, which is more important for this conversation, is smart contracts. And that came with Ethereum. So what
Okay.
Ethereum had different than Bitcoin was just sending Bitcoin from one person to another. What
Okay.
Ethereum brought is, besides sending things from one person to another, you could then also create applications on it. So you could write smart contracts. And what a smart contract basically is you could imagine it like a regular contract, like a contract two businesses would have with each other, that basically says, when party A completes this task, then party B must pay party A.
Okay.
And in the normal world, you would either just trust that party B does in fact send the money, or, if they don't, you would get a lawyer basically involved and be like, hey, send them the money. What a smart contract is basically that at a high level, basically that, but in code. So you could basically code in that, hey, once party A does this and it's written and it's read by the Oracle on the blockchain. Oracle is basically something, just vocab there, is something that
Love it.
reads normal data out in the real world. So it could read the
Okay.
stock market, it could read, just normal things, and then send it to the blockchain.
Thank you. You beat me to it. You probably saw my eyes glaze over. Oracle. What's
figure out what an oracle was? I was like, I don't want to ask. So you could say that party A did in fact do the thing, and instead of just trusting that party B would send it, party B would have put their money in escrow on the smart contract, and once it's completed, it would automatically send. And if it wasn't completed, it would revert right back. So you no longer have to trust that people are going to do their jobs. You don't need somebody in the middle to approve and basically say like, hey, yeah, this was done. They're just having these contracts kind of reading data and authorizing things, when they say they should be authorized. So it basically makes all these kind of like daily tasks and small transactions something that comes down to code. And what that basically allows us to do is remove companies and remove, these middlemen that would be in the middle basically to verify that everything has happened in the way that it should. So one kind of like of my favorite examples that kind of applies to most people as far as removing middlemen is the Brave browser. So the Brave browser is basically like Chrome. It looks very similar to Chrome, but the main difference is it has like a little crypto wallet built into it. And what the Brave browser's idea is that you should get paid for your attention. Their token's called the BAT token, which means basic attention token. And currently on the current like internet, the way it operates is we all know the internet is paid for by advertisers. Advertisers are paying for things. They're paying Google or other, big companies. And that's how we're seeing things for free. We're seeing it for free because somebody else is paying for it.
Yeah.
If you were to do this on the Brave browser, you could either say like, hey, I don't want to see advertisements, block the pop-ups. Or you could say, hey, I do want to see them, but I want to get paid for it. And then whenever you see like a little pop-up appear on YouTube or anything like that, you would get a couple cents sent to your wallet. And that's the price of your attention. And that's the price that the marketers would normally be paying to Google, paid straight to you, straight to your wallet. And that is like such a clear,
I like that because I've heard and spoken with artists who will say why NFTs and the blockchain is useful for them because they're able to make more money than they ever did before. And it's like, okay, that's a great use case for the creatives in the world. This is a perfect use case for the everyday person who is doing this regardless. So we're not changing the way we go about the world. We're not saying advertising is dead, but we're just saying there's another way of maybe getting the end user more involved, but also maybe more educated and more aware of what's happening, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And sharing the profits and, sharing
Yeah.
what they're worth. They've said data is basically like the oil of the 21st century. And we're just giving that data. So rather be paid for it.
Yeah.
And why that's only been possible with the blockchain is because without it, who would be in the middle sending the money from the advertiser to the user? Who would do that? That's who's doing it right now, and it would absolutely not be worth anyone's time to send
Got you.
5 cent transactions or like micro transactions. Those are basically only viable on the blockchain. So you can apply that type of principle to plenty of different kind of user experiences, but it requires a complete twisting of how we've traditionally imagined businesses, basically.
And that's important for me because you said that right at the beginning, which I thought was really interesting. Here is we're experiencing a whole new jargon in the crypto space, but we're also having to experience a whole new way of thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
That the traditional way of thinking of how we get to point A to B is somewhat shifting here, which I like that you
It's
explained that
shifted,
again.
it's automated, and it's bringing, while decentralized, it's bringing kind of the end users and like the original users much closer. Another kind of nice example that I like, of removing middlemen, and this one's for a little bit of a different kind of angle, would be kind of the supply chain. So my first example was how users can get, end money and be part of the equation. This one is by removing a lot of middlemen, we can have much more verifiable systems. So basically, supply chain today is, an amalgamation of tons of different like small companies in different governments sending it, information to another government, perhaps hiding information when something down the line is counterfeit or
It's far
goes
from
bad.
transparent. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So by putting the supply chain basically on the blockchain, it basically enables that as a product moves through the system and say it has a QR code on it,
Yeah.
at each point it would just be scanned in and stored in the blockchain. And what that basically does is it would create one universal system that the end user can just look right at and verify versus having that behind 7 or 8 different databases that are just trusting that, they've given us the right information.
That transparency, it's interesting because again, like but that is another term that's been thrown up around, decentralization is a whole other piece, but the transparency element is another one that keeps being thrown around. And you're putting this in very real use cases. When I hear all of this, my mind cannot help but wonder, does this mean that as an end user, I hold more of the burden of the education and the responsibility and the liability? Does that lie more with me than ever before? And to some of us, that might sound scary. To some people, that's like, that's great. That's what I wanted. And to some of us, it's like, this is why I like the iPhone, because I can just turn it on and it works and I don't need to question anything and everything's just happening and it's happening the way I want it to. So I asked this question also as someone who's going on that education journey of like, where does that burden and responsibility lie? And how do you think about that? And is that even the right way of thinking about it?
Definitely. And, when I say removing the middlemen, I don't actually imagine a world where we remove 100% of the middlemen.
Good
but
point.
Maybe we remove 90 to 95%. Because we probably need someone helping out at certain portions along the line, but they don't need to be at every step in kind of a redundant way. So, even like to the supply chain, like maybe me as the very, very end user is not going to check the QR code and make sure that it came from the exact place. You would have maybe one person, one organization at the end who can verify easily along the way. But what I think is more relevant to people and what's more on people's mind is, responsible for their own money. So largely touted in the crypto space is be your own bank. store your own money, everything. And I have friends that do that. I have friends that have their life savings all on their ledger. And, if they trust themselves, that's great. Go for it. However, me and some of my other friends who are also equally in the crypto space, we definitely have much more reservations about perhaps storing all of our life savings on, a key that I can be clumsy sometimes. I don't know. I don't entirely trust that. So, there's a couple different alternatives. I think the more decentralized alternative is continued improvement on the UI UX of these decentralized systems. So maybe one day, we're responsible right now. If we mess up one letter in that 24 letter thing, we lose that money.
That's the one.
Triple check. But obviously that's moving towards, more user readable names. So, the UI there is getting fixed. But then, it still matters your private key. If you lose your private key, you lose everything. There's no customer support to talk to. That's terrifying if you have, a year's or more salary on there. So some initiatives that have happened, posed by Vitalik actually, was a social recovery mechanism. So basically, you would assign 3 separate people to be in charge of helping you recover your private key if you ever lost it. And they ideally actually would not know each other, so they can't collude against you. But if you were to ever lose your key, think about that. But
when you think about the unintended consequences of a great solution, that's one. But
if you were to lose it, you could reach out to them and have them each go and sign this transaction. And if, however many you needed to signed it, then you could get your private key reset. So that's like a nice, very decentralized form of insurance of, human error, basically. And then, there's additional things if you want to go less decentralized. There are, I still store like a decent amount of my crypto saving funds, like on an insured centralized thing, but Coinbase or Gemini or any of those like larger, very insured ones. And I'll keep, good percentage there and keep my like play money out in the more decentralized world. So I think we'll see how the public responds. Are people more comfortable with a bank-like institution? And yes, we would have Coinbase as a middleman, but we would have like 5 less other banks, like in the transactions that happen. So it's still like minimizing. Or, in 30 years, is Gen Z and all the later gens very comfortable with being completely decentralized? And we actually are just social recovering and do have our life savings on it. So we'll see, but I get the concern today. The concern is very real today.
And look, and I think these are 2 nice points to wrap up on, which is we know that what we're experiencing right now will look very, very different in a couple of months, a couple of years. We're still in the infancy. There's a lot still to be learned. And look, that UI piece and that user friendliness is, again, still very much in its infancy, which all makes sense based on everything that you've shared. Paula, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all of this knowledge. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. That time really flies.
It really does.
It really does. It was really fun.
Thanks, Paula. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for sticking around to the end, and I hope you enjoyed today's guests as much as I did. If you've got big crypto questions, send them our way and we'll attempt to get them answered for you. And for the more seasoned crypto investors and enthusiasts, do go check out our weekly podcast, The Unstoppable Podcast, to learn more about the latest innovations in Web3, NFTs, and the decentralized web.